Hey everyone, it's good to see you all. It's another talk for Darshan Talks. I'm really excited to have today's guest. It's Elizabeth Molson, and she likes to be called. She goes by Liz, but if you look her up on LinkedIn, it's going to be Elizabeth Molson. Today we're going to talk about the shift from payers to patients, what it means for strategy, how marketing is changing, why trust is more valuable than research, and how we can better manage your career. Hopefully, we'll get to all of them. I'm not sure if we will, but that's the goal. I do want to introduce her, but I'm going to let her add some more information about herself. She holds a master's degree in pharmaceutical research from the University of Southern California and an MBA from University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill. She's worked across med tech and life sciences in Roche Diagnostics, Medtronic Diabetes, Dentsply Sirona, and Curia. Welcome. Good to see you, Elizabeth.
Thank you so much. I love our conversations. I'm glad we get to share this. What I always take away from our conversations is some unique view or insight that you share. So I'm grateful with how free you are with your experience to help us have a different way of looking at things. It's going to be fun.
You're very kind, and thank you. So let me ask you this before we get started. What have you been seeing in the context of sort of this shift from payers to patients, this idea of direct to patient? Is this a real thing, or is this something that's new, or has this already existed? Has it been around for a while?
I think when you go through enough cycles in your life and you go through different seasons in your life, you start to see them circle back. So when I go way back to when I kind of started my commercial career after my R&D career, I had the opportunity to work on some brands that were for ED and allergies. And back in the day, I recorded TV spots. So you would have the celebrity hold the basketball. You might remember those TV spots where there was a celebrity sitting in two bathtubs. He was in one, his wife was in the other, and they talked about things that they couldn't talk about on TV. And so when you go back to that era of how did we first start leveraging our ability in the United States to talk directly to patients in that format, then we went very digital. The rest of the world doesn't do direct advertising. So that digital really took the focus. And now we go back with companies like Lilly doing patient direct. You've got even our government trying to do direct. And now it's going to circle back to how can we have patient conversations that are compliantly advertising direct to therapeutic results. So I think it circles back, but I can't leverage what I did in a TV studio. It's going to be different. And that's the fun of it.
Why do you think it's going to be different?
I think the noise ratio is off the charts in a way we've never seen. Used to be that you would do TV shows, mailers, billboards. Those are coming back because digital is so saturated. It's become so cheap and so easy to come up with a tagline, a headline, a creative, and then just throw it out there and A/B test it to death, or shoot out some emails to 100 people, then to 2,000. And we're all saturated. And now the AI tools are good enough to generate content, but they're not generating novel content. So now you have to circle back and say, how do I do something completely different in my messaging, my targeting, my storytelling? So I believe it was the Wall Street Journal last week posted this big article about companies are desperately seeking storytellers. So we're going back to the basics. What is your brand? What do you stand for? What do you offer? How do you connect with people in an age where more taglines and more media is just getting lost?
But the key for digital, the part that made digital stand out was, number one, the fact that you can control it so granularly and you get really, really great analytics. You lose a lot of that as you start moving towards billboards and mailers. Now, does the noise of, if you're putting it out there, let's just see what happens, outweigh the control that something like digital gives you?
Yeah. So I think what you're talking about is a huge shift that happened. We used to believe in doing customer testing, market research, a 1-year strat plan that rolled into tactical deliverables. And then we moved into this digital world where data was everything. If it wasn't measured, it didn't exist.
Right.
And so we've lost that ability to say, Nike isn't selling tennis shoes, they're selling athletic excellence. And since everyone has shifted to digital and data only, that investment that's not measurable of who are we, what do we stand for has been lost. So now it's all about products, features, and benefits. And we've lost the human connection. And AI is not great at human connection anymore. And so I think people are realizing we swung really hard into data metrics.
Yeah.
We tried to go into the middle of the customer journey and then go straight to the end of the journey for sales and hire more sales reps. And we're going to close more deals, missing the fact that people don't know what the company is, what we stand for, who we are, what we solve for, why we connect with people and care about people over profits. That's been lost for data. So you have to find a balance. And that, I think, is where people are starting to look again and say, maybe my budget, my marketing team isn't 100% measurable.
You've been in the C-suite. The C-suite's going, I have a fixed budget. There's only so much money I can spend. What you're telling me is I need to take a certain portion of this budget that you tell me is already tight and then spend it on something neither you nor I can measure, and then hope and pray that it translates to something.
Yeah.
Isn't this a hard pill to swallow? And then I'm going to take that next portion, which is, isn't this where you start getting compliance errors? And what I'm talking about is, you know what? Today it's those billboards. Tomorrow it's a nonprofit. Day after tomorrow, it's a nonprofit that's owned by a physician. Day after that, it's a physician who's a high prescriber. And that sort of, you keep building on that, and the road to hell gets paved with good intentions.
I totally agree. It's a slippery slope. Like, walk into a board meeting and say, it's been a tough couple of years. We've had to make comebacks. Now invest in something that's not measurable on faith, right? And you just have to re-anchor people and say, marketing is critical to the business. The other thing I always say is, if you're going to exit within 3 years, you're right. Do sales. Don't do marketing. Right? Marketing is a long game. And so I can't walk in the boardroom and say, look, you're going to spend 10% of your budget and then we're just going to throw it in the wind because I know this works. Trust me. Right? And then you put a whole bunch of tactics behind it, but you really have to disconnect marketing from sales. What's happened is marketing has slid into sales support. Marketing has slid into tactics and living quarter by quarter by quarter, side by side with their sales rep. And that's called great integration and partnership. The downside is that's no longer marketing. Marketing has to live 2 quarters ahead of the business. Q1, you have to plan and build and be intentional. Q2, you execute. Q3, you measure. By Q4, marketing can't save the year. That thinking, that business savvy, being around a few times and breaking our lean in to the SaaS model of real time, minimum viable product. Let's just iterate. We'll get it done. 3 months is too long. You can't think about something for 3 months. We used to think about things for 5 years.
Right.
And so I think we've just swung too hard at the end of the journey that we're not putting enough up front. But you're right. It's trade-offs. Where I'm excited in the boardroom and in the C-suite to have those discussions is I can lower my cost creating content with AI tools. I can. I take that money and I put it into telling our story and building a messaging that actually connects with people. That's different. It's the upfront work. So I try to say it's going to net out neutral. You just can't pocket the savings. And I think we've cut the marketing budget so much in the last 5 years that it's underwater. Do more with less, do more with less. Now we just have less.
Now, it's an interesting comment you made, this idea that do more with less. At the same time, we're getting a lot of private equity companies, and you and I had this conversation last week when we were talking about topics. Yeah. Private equity companies are going, I'm stuck. I need to get out because I'm about 1.5 to 2 years overdue to sell this company. And my story cannot be I'm stuck. My story is I need to show increasing sales.
Yeah.
So, Liz, what I need from you is I need returns. And you trying to make me feel better by saying we're investing into marketing does not change my bottom line. Doesn't how do you talk to these same private equity companies who are looking for that ROI, that return investment, and go, it's worth it? Or can you not do that?
You can. That's where you know what the goal is. You say, thank you so much for telling me what truly, truly has to happen. And then you execute to that. You're not going to be doing brand. You're not going to be doing press releases. You're going to do that middle part of the journey and sales support and conversion. And you can. We know those tactics. Those are measurable. If that's what's needed, then my role as the executive on the team leading that group is to say, okay, this is the budget I have. We're not going to exit in 4 or 5 years. We've already burned that runway. We missed that opportunity. Now I need to take all these skills I have and then, yes, optimize for them, right? Am I doing paid webinars? Am I doing, email outbound outreach? Am I doing influencer marketing? Am I doing ambassador kits and turning all of my employees into advocates and giving them the tools that allow them to be compliant more publicly on LinkedIn? And then you just go into execution mode. If that's where the company is, that's where the company is. And so you have to read the room. Now, do I think those companies are going to get the biggest bang? Well, they already know they're not. They want out. Okay. Then now my job is to have a pipeline that shows that an exit makes sense.
Very interesting. So it's just a different strategy. Now, one of the other things you mentioned that I thought was fascinating, where you said that people are looking for the 2 to 3 year exit, and if that's true, then you need to focus on the middle of the funnel, if you will. If that's true, how does that work in the life sciences where your exclusivity period is only 3 to 5 years, which means that you can get maybe really you're getting at one round, maybe a second exit round if you're really, really lucky. And by the time you get to that second exit round, you really just want to have sold the asset and moved on if you can avoid it. Does the idea of investing into branding work in the life sciences? Or especially in drugs, where your timelines are so compressed, or is it a chase to the middle?
And this is where vice president of strategy roles have gone away, strategy departments have gone away, but it remains the absolute core. When the executive leadership team and the board decide on their strategy, that's going to determine how resources are allocated, budget is allocated, whether you can go big and build a brand that's going to have a pipeline that gives you a multiple because you can see the pipe, or you're going to stay very niche and your brand building is smaller group of people, very defined channels, much more tactical. But we don't talk about strategy anymore, or the organizations I've talked to, strategy lives in the C-suite's head. Or worse, it's done every year where they freshen up the same 75 slides and it ends up on the deck. But those deep conversations of slowing down and saying, wait, does this make sense? What are we really trying to do is going to determine whether first round, second round, any round, your multiplier is 2, 3, 4 or 7, 8, 9.
So the bigger pot is the value. You're not, the story is, hold on, you just need to wait. There's a bigger pot down the line. And do you want to be in for that ride? Or do you just want those 2, 3, 4 multipliers like you were talking about? Now,
yeah, and I mean, that's what's happening, right? Either they're selling the assets as small, mid-sized companies earlier on and letting them be commercialized by the bigger companies. And those bigger companies are doing a fantastic job. I mean, look at what Wegovy did with all the influencers and the celebrity kicking out, it was Ozempic, right? And then all the things that came through a very consumer approach to a medical solution, and how, Ozempic came out, and then Lilly came out with diabetes indication of Mounjaro that then went into Zepbound for obesity. And now they're following up an injectable with a stabilized for the rest of your life beyond this oral therapeutic. But these launches are not small. They're very intentional, right? Influencer led, commercial oriented. All of these strategic elements are in place. It's strategy that I haven't seen executed in a while. And now they're doing direct with their pharmacy. Those are multipliers. I mean, amazing multipliers. And either you're in that level or you're somewhere in a smaller risk category.
I would argue that the Ozempics of the world and the Wegovy's of the world were like selling water to people who are thirsty. It doesn't. The only thing better than selling a country full of obese and fat people a weight loss medication is selling bald people hair gain medication, like Propecia. So it's so easy. So I'm not sure that I'm giving Lilly or Novo that much sort of cred. I'd argue that they didn't do as good a job because the company that really did a good job were those compounding pharmacies who are not held to the same rules. That said, we're going to do direct to patient. We're not held to the same laws that the FDA thinks that you pharma companies need to be held to. And as a result, I'm going to, if you FDA want to come after me, we'll deal with it. But that's what made Hims and Hers a multi-billion-dollar company. And every pharmacist suddenly thought that they can also be a multi-billion-dollar company. And not enough of them were wrong. They
did well. They did. And I think it's a lot of winners, but the compounding pharmacies saw an opportunity. They took it and kudos, right? They helped get access because at the end of the day, what I think is a change statement is access. So I loved your Rogaine. My analogy is a little different because I used to sell Cialis when I was a pharmaceutical sales rep.
Right, exactly.
Right?
It turns out men are really, really easy. Sell men manhood, and you've got an easy win.
Right? Like, how did you become a top 10 sales rep? I sold Cialis when it first came out. And I do think there is, but what's really changing is the model. It's going cash pay. And so it is selling what people want. So it's easy. But it's also changing that people are going to compound pharmacies. How many people didn't even know what a compound pharmacy was until this became an opportunity for them? And so it's really interesting to see the healthcare system go far more intentional cash pay than through the payer modality. And so that change statement is definitely here to stay, I think. Just seeing if we lost him. All right, so I'll just keep kind of talking. The next thing
I'm here. Sorry, I was trying to be fancy and trying to like have you be the focus and stuff. Turns out it doesn't work that great.
I was like, I don't want to lose you. What do I do?
I'm still here.
Awesome.
I was trying to change the angle on this so that you just get a better view and it's not just my face looking at you the whole time. But anyway, here's a question for you. I have not seen anyone ask this question, but I'm kind of going direct to patient was inspired by compounding pharmacies. However, as we just said, compounding pharmacies tilled the field or whatever you want to call it. And Lilly is building castles on the work that was tilled by these compounding pharmacies. What are the chances that the next direct to patient is a partnership with compounding pharmacies? Because you go, we are held to a bunch of rules. You're not. You do the initial part of this. We'll come in after you.
So I have a little bit of history that makes me see it from a different lens.
Ooh, go ahead.
Direct to patient was not done by compound pharmacy.
No,
it's
okay.
always been a strategy. So go back to Allegra, Nasacort AQ. There's another one, the allergy meds.
Yeah.
Those were all prescription drugs for their patent life. And then when they went to generics, those companies turned them into over the counter.
Right.
That to me was the first direct patient, because then they held the brand name and then marketed it directly as a consumer brand. So I see compounding pharmacies as being a different channel of accessing that, which is a massive change statement. But do I see these organizations wanting to work with compound pharmacies? Only if it gets them that advantage through some of the FDA. But as the FDA is changing, they're going to want to keep owning the entire vertical. They're going to want to keep their brand onto direct to consumer, is what I would guess.
So I'm gonna again, this is why talking to you is so much fun, because we have all these competing thought processes, because we've both been in the industry for so long. But let me challenge you on that. So I agree with you on Nasacort. I agree with you on Allegra, but I would argue that it was nowhere close to the success we're seeing with Wegovy or Ozempic. They were, I mean, you had Bidil that had a version of this. There were 4, 5, 6 drugs, and you can name them on one hand, maybe two hands, the number of companies that tried to do a direct-to-patient launch. But they were always almost the sideshow. We want to control things, but we need a strategy where we control the brand, blah, blah, blah. They were never super successful. This was the first opportunity I'm aware of. I mean, I think after, as you put it, Pfizer's PrEP is one. You just mentioned Cialis, Viagra. After Viagra and Cialis, I would argue this is your next blockbuster. We haven't seen the likes of this in decades. So if that logic holds, and I could be wrong, I'm waiting for you to challenge me, but if that logic holds, I would argue, and this is not something I want as a pharmacist. As a pharmacist, I would be extremely displeased on being used like this. But I also think that my displeasure doesn't count much. But I would argue that what would happen is people going, I can say things you can, so you go ahead and say them, and then I'll come in afterwards and I'll follow the rules I'm supposed to. This way I still control the brand, you still make some money along the way, and everyone's happy. The only one that's not happy is the payer. However, maybe the payer doesn't even need to be involved, because I'm seeing a lot of companies doing exactly what you're saying, which is we'll just do cash pays. And now who's really getting a kickback here? And there's just a value chain I can see created that changes this. What's your thought on that?
I wonder if it mirrors the off-labeling that was always out there, right?
Ooh, I like that.
I gotta be careful how I talk here, but there was always understanding that a lot of your more research, clinical leaders and providers and physicians would take an opportunity, have a depth of understanding of the biophysiology, and do some off-label. And so that created challenges, but it was very well known that those communities were very tight and networked. And so I wonder if there's insights into what, is very hard to discuss, because you have to be compliant. So these off-label conversations are all, off the record. But I think it leans into what you're saying, is if the compounding pharmacists have a different set of guidelines,
right?
How do you tap into that the way we did with some of the more clinical people in our launches who would do things in their own unique way?
So as an FYI, I don't know how much you follow this as a compliance lawyer. This is the world I follow a lot. We know that the FDA has lost 6 to 10 court cases on off-label. So they've had to put out the CFL, consistent with the label guidance, or the SIUU guidance, both of which allow for certain off-label speech, all of which are inspired by that Coronia case, that are all inspired by the IMS v. Sorrell case, blah, blah, blah. This is happening right now, like in the courts right now. We don't have a decision on this, but I think the DOJ is actually challenging whether off-label prescribing is okay. So
see, this is what we'll talk about. You, I had no idea. I just don't like dance around off-label, right? We go to you for the expertise.
It's so much fun to talk to people who get this, but the question then comes in. I think you drew that right analogy, which is, I wonder if it's like that off-label conversation And the truth is, there are learnings there. But it's always been this third rail that no one wants to touch, because the moment you touch it, you change intended use. And if you change intended use, that's where the FDA has moved the ball now. We lose the off-label marketing cases every time. We're going to change the ball, move it to intended use. If we see data in your background that said that you were always going to market this for this off-label use, that's when we're going to hold you responsible. And we've seen cases where the DOJ has won those cases. On the other hand, what happens when you plan for off-label use, though it's not you doing it, but it's a agent of yours? And does the pharmacy count as an agent?
And that's a great question, right? Right. So when you do your medical affairs strategy and you do traditional, everything is going to go through the clinician, physician, provider, and the payer system. Yeah. Right. Your medical affairs becomes the organization that has those conversations. Sometimes your medical science liaisons. But now, if we're going less into this rigor and we're going more into healthcare strategy is a consumer strategy, we're leaning into the direct, we're leaning into a vertical that allows direct prescriptions and cost pay. How many layers does that revolutionize? And the answer is all of them from a commercial point.
I'm going to challenge you here, and I'll tell you why this is a huge problem. This happens, again, from a compliance perspective, this happens every 5 to 7 years, because commercial gets this brilliant idea that MSLs, you guys can talk off label, we can. So you go ahead and do this. Every 7 to 10 years, we see this. GSK paid a $3 billion fine. I still remember that Wall Street Journal visual of the top pharma payments, and it was literally all in the billions. And this was 10 years ago. And it was crazy because people thought that MSLs and medical affairs in general can speak off label. Let's effectively make them a commercial arm. And that was where the problem lay. On the other hand, is this different somehow? And I'm not convinced it is, but I want to hear you make that pitch. Make the pitch why the fact that off-label communications now being allowed enables medical affairs to really be different.
So this is what I love. And I always have someone of your caliber challenge me on these things, because I am. You called me a commercial marketer. Thank you. We need to have these conversations and find out not what is or isn't, but what you keep saying. What is the risk profile we are willing to accept for our commercial team?
Great.
That's always it. And then do we understand what we're training our teams to say and do, and what that risk profile looks like for us? Those are always the conversations before we launch.
Just so everyone knows, this is not legal advice. It is for educational purposes only.
Right. Disclaimer. And so I always listen to that, right? My job is to push it because I need to sell. And your job is to say we're going to stay compliant. And I love that conversation.
Correct.
Where I think it's changing is as things compress, as profitability the last whatever years have struggled, as people are wanting to exit but can't, everybody in the organization is getting pushed into sales.
So I'm going to challenge you there. But keep going.
What is the role of med affairs and MSLs when everybody is being pushed to sales? That's a fair question. That is the question. What is the role of marketing as we get pushed to sales? What is the role of program leadership as we get pushed into sales? So when the focus becomes, as you mentioned earlier, we need to exit in 2 or 3 years. We need a multiplier, right? The conversations are less about Johnson & Johnson's credo, which I respect for years and still do, all the way now to what is your department doing to help with profitability? And that is a boardroom shift. That is a C-suite shift. And that has rolled down to every department. So what is your role into sales?
So I think the answer comes multifold. So number one, this was going back to GSK. I don't know why we're picking in GSK, but GSK had, they were effectively telling their medical affairs people that your bonus depends on sales in your area. And DOJ said that just because the person wears a white coat does not make them any less sales. These are not MSLs. Their speech is not protected by the First Amendment. We couldn't target them if they were engaging in free speech and protected by the First Amendment. The moment you're engaged in commercial speech, we have jurisdiction. Therefore, the off-label communications that happened, the pitching of products that may not have been completely truthful and not mislabeled, we're going to call you out on that. And that's where those multi-billion-dollar fines came about. So I would argue that if you are in medical affairs and you're being seen as you're being measured based on profits, that scale is off balance. Now the question becomes, is that scale off balance because of the rules? In which case, what rule has actually changed? And I say this to, I used to be on multiple boards involving medical affairs and speaking at a lot of these conferences and the like. And one of the things we would always discuss was, what is the difference if sales reps can speak off label and medical affairs can speak off label? Why do I need medical affairs at all? Why can't I have a completely sales-based organization, not call them medical affairs? We will just have straight up sales reps. And people try to tell me, and I'd be curious if anyone jumps in and tells us, but people try to tell me that the answer is because there's value to the scientific discussion. And I'd argue, I'm not sure a physician draws the same distinction as people in pharma do. What is your take overall? I'd love you to comment on this diatribe that I just went on.
So I think medical affairs and those conversations is brand awareness. It's supporting the brand, it's supporting the product. So if you believe in medical affairs and the value of having human-to-human connection exchange, then you believe in marketing and you should put money into having that built out in a way that you have that support. So if we do it for medical affairs, for physicians, because we need to support sales and support the relationship with those key clients, you're essentially believing in marketing.
I don't have a problem with you taking the position that medical affairs helps the brand overall. The question is, in what context? Does it help the brand with where we care about the patient and we want to be aware, we want to be available, we want to address the needs of the patient? Or is this a scenario where we care about the brand and we're going to do the 1-2 punch? The medical affairs person goes, let's have a conversation about the off-label stuff. Sales reps scheduled for the next meeting, let's prescribe. And that's happened with numerous companies, including some of the med device companies that I'm aware of. And that's where companies came back to target them. So the entire premise for med affairs came about in the early 2000s. And I know med affairs has existed before that. You and I have lived through some of this stuff. The gray hairs are starting to show. However, the story on med affairs was always, you know what? You can't stop a doctor talking to another doctor. That is a problem from a First Amendment perspective. You can't speak. There are certain types of speech that are protected. That is scientific discussion. That is political speech. Both of which get this protection. The moment you say that med affairs is simply a brand extension, they are simply the extension of my brand, and they are simply a place that increases the brand value. You've changed them from being that protected sphere of educational to being commercial, and then falls under that ambit. What is your take? Why does this shift keep happening when you point out that they are part of that brand awareness? Because in the end, if you're not supporting the brand, no one's bringing in money, and if no one's bringing in money, why are we even here?
Well, I think everything in a company is part of the brand, right? Your sales support line, when somebody calls and has a question, is part of your brand. Your scientific discussions are part of your brand. Everything you do is part of the brand. I think what differentiates is how and who you execute with, right? So there was a time in my career where I did unbranded patient education campaigns to educate, hey, this is what psoriasis is. Go to mypsoriasis.com. Completely unbranded, but with intent. Right? MSLs in those conversations are definitely of their own caliber and have their own value proposition. Holistically, at a C-suite level, especially in commercial, I have to deliver 3 things. Lots of different ways to do that. MSLs, sales reps, marketing, right? High level. You have to know who we are, right? That to me is this brand awareness. You know who we are, what we do and how you get it, which is usually sales, products, features, benefits, close the deal. And then how do you value us or feel about us? And that's going to be your support experiences, your MSLs, your science, your customer service. What do people say about us when we're not saying it? They're saying it. And so we've broken it down into these different structures, which we have to do, right? It's eating an elephant. But then at the end of the day, you've got to look back again and say, as all of these things are changing, cash pay, which is segmenting into 2 populations, those who can afford cash pay, those who may be forced into cash pay due to coverage gaps. And then you have coverage. So we're just adding layers of complexity into a system that was already unbelievably complex because it takes 6 of us in a room to decide, are we on the right side of what we're trying to go to market with and how we're going to communicate it? Let's make it more complex, right? Awesome. It's why you and I have fun things to continue to do. Like
Liz, as you could tell, I knew we'd never we didn't even touch the first topic, just to be clear, because there's just so much here to discuss. And it's so fun to talk to you. Let me ask you this before we go, because we're just going to have you back. There's no way around this.
It'll be fun.
How can people reach you?
Yes. So you can reach out to me on LinkedIn, Elizabeth Malson. If you're in the industry, I accept connection requests. You can DM me. I read those and write those as a human being. So you can DM me. You can also reach out. I do individual personal branding for medtech executives at executiveecho.com, which you'll see is right below me. And there you can schedule a meeting with me if you want to chat about some stuff. So I'd love to connect with folks in the industry. I love these conversations. I love being challenged. Here, Darshan, let me just challenge you on that. Yes, please do. It makes us all stronger and we have great conversations. So thank you.
Thank you. Liz, as you can tell, is incredible. It was super fun to have you. Thank you so much for coming on. And to think it all came from a LinkedIn conversation. So LinkedIn conversations do work. Thank you all for tuning in. And I hope you reach out to her, reach out to me, and we'll go from there.